What happens when the fairy tale shatters in front of the entire world? On the night of his 35th birthday, tech billionaire Julian Croft hosted the party of the year. The guest list was a who's who of New York's elite. But while Julian, the golden boy of AI, toasted to his success, his pregnant wife Amelia stood on the sidelines, invisible to the man who was her entire world. He didn't just forget her, he erased her. But one guest with a camera saw everything. By the next morning, Julian's perfect life was a dumpster fire, and Amelia was the most famous woman on the planet. This is the story of how one night of public humiliation led to a global reckoning. The silence in their Fifth Avenue penthouse was a living entity. It breathed in the sterile, air-conditioned quiet and exhaled the scent of expensive, untouched lilies. Amelia Hayes. 7 months pregnant, and feeling every bit of the weight traced the rim of a porcelain teacup. Her reflection warped and distant in the silver tray beside it. Outside, the sounds of Manhattan were a muted symphony, a frantic, energetic score for a life she felt increasingly disconnected from. Her life wasn't here in the heart of the city. It was contained within the 10,000 square feet of glass and steel that Julian Croft, her husband, called home. Their story had once been the kind of modern romance magazines swooned over. Amelia, a brilliant and passionate art historian from a comfortable but by no means wealthy Boston family, had met Julian at a charity gala. He wasn't the titan of the tech world, then just a fiercely intelligent and charmingly relentless founder of a fledgling AI startup called Nexus AI. He'd pursued her with a single-minded focus that she found both dizzying and irresistible. He'd loved her mind. He'd said the way she could find the soul in a brushstroke, the history in a piece of clay. He'd made her feel seen. Now, 4 years later, Julian was a titan. Nexus AI was a unicorn, a behemoth valued in the tens of billions, and Julian Croft was its king. His face was on the cover of Forbes, and wired his name a synonym for innovation. But the man who once looked at her like she was a masterpiece now looked straight through her. His gaze fixed on a horizon she couldn't see, one populated by stock tickers, server farms, and the endless hungry pursuit of more. Amelia placed a hand on the gentle swell of her belly, where their son was kicking softly. This baby was supposed to be their anchor, the project that brought Julian back from the stratosphere of his success. When she'd told him she was pregnant, he had been momentarily ecstatic. He'd held her, his eyes bright with a flicker of the old Julian. "A son," he'd whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "An heir." The word had landed with a thud in the quiet of their bedroom, a cold, transactional term that had more to do with legacy and dynasty than with love and family. The excitement had faded quickly, replaced by the all-consuming pressure of a new product launch. Project Chimera, he called it. It was revolutionary. He promised an AI that could predict market trends with 99% accuracy. It would change the world. It would also change him, hollowing him out until all that was left was the CEO. His days were a blur of meetings, calls with Tokyo and London, and strategy sessions that bled late into the night. He would come home, his eyes glowing with the blue light of his phone, kiss her forehead absently, and murmur something about changing the world before disappearing into his home office until dawn. Tonight was his 35th birthday party. It was not, of course, a simple celebration. It was a networking event, a power play, a carefully orchestrated performance with a guest list curated by 3 different PR firms. Senators would be there rubbing shoulders with movie stars. Rival tech CEOs would be sizing each other up over champagne that cost more than her first car. It was, in Julian's words, a critical confluence of influence. Amelia had tried to suggest something smaller. Just us, she'd said a month ago, her hand on his arm. Maybe a weekend away. We could go back to that little inn in Vermont where you proposed. Julian had patted her hand without looking up from his tablet. This is better, honey. It's important. Everyone who's anyone will be here. It's for us, for the family. The family. It felt like another one of his brands, a subsidiary of Julian Croft, Inc. She had spent the afternoon with the stylist Julian's assistant had hired. A severe woman with a measuring tape and a critical eye had paraded a dozen designer gowns before her. They were all beautiful, all obscenely expensive, and all designed to elegantly conceal her pregnancy as if it were a flaw to be hidden. She finally chose a deep sapphire silk gown by Valentino. It was graceful and flowed over her body, but it felt like a costume. Her best friend, Chloe, had called while the stylist was pinning the hem. "Are you sure you're up for this?" Chloe had asked, her voice laced with the protective skepticism she always reserved for Julian. Chloe was a journalist, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who saw the world in headlines and deadlines, and she'd never been fully sold on the Julian Croft fairy tale. "I have to be," Amelia had replied, trying to sound more cheerful than she felt. "It's his big night. It's his birthday, Amelia, not a coronation. Don't let him treat you like part of the scenery." Now, standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the city lights a glittering carpet at her feet. Amelia felt exactly like part of the scenery. The penthouse, which she had once painstakingly decorated with warm colors, personal art, and comfortable furniture, had been slowly transformed by Julian's team. Her favorite paintings were replaced with bold, abstract modern art that was a better investment. The cozy armchair where she loved to read was now a stark, angular leather chaise that was aesthetically pleasing but impossible to relax in. It was a show home, a gilded cage. The door to the master suite opened, and Julian strode out. He was already in his tuxedo, a custom Tom Ford creation that fit him like a second skin. He looked like the man on the magazine covers, powerful, handsome, radiating an almost electric aura of confidence. He was checking his watch, a Patek Philippe that had been a gift from a Saudi prince. "Traffic is already backing up on 5th, he said, his voice clipped and efficient. "The first wave of guests will be here in 20 minutes. Is the catering team all set?" "Yes," Amelia said softly. "Everything's under control." He finally looked at her, his eyes doing a quick evaluative scan. "Good. You look good. The dress works." He didn't say she looked beautiful. He didn't cross the room to kiss her. He just nodded, a CEO approving an asset. His gaze flickered down to her belly. Is he settled?" "We don't want any drama tonight." The question was so callous, so clinical it stole her breath. "He's a baby, Julian, not a potential PR crisis." Julian sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "You know what I mean, Amelia. Tonight has to be perfect. Ben Carter is closing the deal with the Japanese investors tonight. I need everyone to see stability, strength, a perfect partnership." He gestured vaguely between them. "Us." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He snatched it from the marble countertop. His entire demeanor shifted. A broad, genuine smile spread across his face, a smile she hadn't seen directed at her in months. "Zara, you're downstairs." "Fantastic." No, don't wait in line. I'll have security bring you right up." He typed furiously, his thumbs a blur. Zara Vance. The name sent a familiar chill through Amelia. Zara was the founder of Elysian, a lifestyle and branding empire built on social media. She was beautiful, sharp, and single. Julian had been spending an increasing amount of time with her, citing a strategic brand alignment. He spoke of her with an energetic admiration that was once reserved for Amelia. "Is she a surprise guest?" Amelia asked, trying to keep her voice even. "She's the keynote," Julian said distractedly. "We're announcing the Nexus Elysian partnership tonight. It's going to be massive." He looked up, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes, as if she were interrupting something far more important. "I've got to go down and greet the first arrivals. Try to mingle. And smile, Amelia, please. Everyone's watching." He turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the cavernous room. The silence rushed back in colder and heavier than before. Everyone's watching. But the only person she wanted to see, her truly see her, had already looked away. She took a deep, shuddering breath, placed both hands on her stomach, and felt the steady, reassuring kick of her son. Tonight, she wasn't just Amelia Hayes, wife of a billionaire. She was a mother. And for the first time, she wondered if that was a role she would have to play alone. The party was less a celebration and more a weather system. It had its own atmosphere, its own pressure, a swirling vortex of power, money, and ambition that sucked the air out of the room. The penthouse, which had felt cavernous and empty just an hour ago, was now a crush of bodies draped in couture and dripping with jewels. Waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne and ludicrously small appetizers. The low thrum of electronic music pulsed beneath a cacophony of laughter and conversation. It was a perfectly engineered spectacle, and at its center, holding court, was Julian. Amelia watched him from across the room, a fixed, pleasant smile on her face, the one she had practiced in the mirror. He was magnificent in his element. He moved with the easy grace of a man who knew he was the most important person in any room he entered. He clapped a senator on the back, shared a laugh with a famous actress, and leaned in to listen intently to a wizened old banker, making each of them feel for a moment like the center of his universe. It was a performance, and he was a master. She tried to do as he'd asked. She tried to mingle. She found herself in a conversation with the wife of a hedge fund manager, a woman with a face so tight with Botox it seemed painful to smile. They talked about summering in the Hamptons and the trouble with finding good help subjects so alien to Amelia's own life that she felt like she was reading from a script. She nodded and smiled, her hand resting protectively on her belly, a gesture that felt like anchoring herself in a storm. She saw Ben Carter, Julian's business partner, and ostensibly their friend. Ben was a grounding force at Nexus AI, the practical engineer to Julian's visionary showman. He caught her eye from across the room and gave her a small, sympathetic smile. He started to move toward her, but was intercepted by a venture capitalist with predatory eyes. Amelia's gaze drifted back to her husband, and that's when she saw her. Zara Vance. She wasn't hard to spot. In a room of beautiful people, Zara was a supernova. She was wearing a liquid gold dress that seemed poured onto her statuesque frame. Her hair was a cascade of dark, glossy waves, and her laugh, sharp and loud, cut through the din. She was standing next to Julian, her hand resting on his forearm, in a gesture of casual intimacy that made Amelia's stomach clench. Julian was beaming his entire body, angled towards Zara. He was laughing not his polite public laugh, but a deep, genuine belly laugh, the kind Amelia hadn't heard from him in years. They were a matched set, two gleaming, polished predators at the top of their game. They looked, Amelia thought, with a pang of cold clarity, perfect together. No one was looking at Amelia. She was a ghost at the feast, her pregnancy rendering her an awkward matronly footnote in the dazzling narrative being written by her husband and this other woman. A waiter offered her a glass of champagne, then saw her belly and stammered an apology, quickly replacing it with a glass of water. It was a small thing, but it felt like another reminder of her otherness, her exclusion from the glittering alcohol-fueled world Julian now inhabited. She decided to try. She had to try. For the baby. For the memory of the man she had married. Taking a deep breath, she began to navigate the sea of people murmuring, "Excuse me," as she squeezed past backs draped in silk and velvet. She finally reached the circle where Julian and Zara held court. "And that's when I told him," Zara was saying, her voice rich with amusement, "if your algorithm can't even predict what shoes I want to buy, how can it predict the Nikkei?" The whole room burst into laughter. Julian's laugh was the loudest. He saw Amelia then, standing at the edge of the circle. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face before being replaced by his smooth public mask. "Amelia," he said, his tone just a little too loud, a little too forced. "There you are." He didn't introduce her to the group. He didn't put his arm around her. He just acknowledged her presence. A box ticked. Zara Vance turned her head slowly, her dark eyes sweeping over Amelia from head to toe. Her gaze lingered for a moment on Amelia's stomach, before a cool, polite smile touched her lips. "Amelia," she said, her voice like honey and ice. "Julian has told me so much about you." It was a lie, and they both knew it. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Zara," Amelia said, her own voice sounding thin and reedy to her ears. "Congratulations on the partnership." "Oh, we're just getting started," Zara said, turning her attention back to Julian, effectively dismissing Amelia. "Jay, you have to tell them about the data integration plan. It's genius." "Jay." She called him Jay. Amelia stood there for another moment, frozen as the conversation flowed around her, leaving her on a silent island. Julian was already lost again. His eyes sparkling as he spoke about Project Chimera, using jargon and acronyms that were designed to impress and exclude. He didn't look at her again. She was invisible. Humiliation washed over her, hot and suffocating. She backed away slowly, the smile still plastered on her face, until she was swallowed by the crowd once more. She found a quiet corner near the windows, her back to the party, and stared out at the indifferent lights of the city. The baby kicked a sharp, insistent jab, as if he too could feel his mother's distress. Later the speeches began. A stage had been set up at one end of the grand living space. Ben Carter went first, giving a warm, if slightly reserved, speech about Julian's vision and drive. Then Julian took the stage, and the room fell silent. He was a magnetic speaker. He talked about the future, about changing the world, about the power of technology to solve humanity's greatest problems. He was charming, funny, and inspiring. Amelia felt a pang of the old pride, the awe she used to feel watching him dream. "But vision is nothing without execution," Julian said, his voice resonating through the speakers. "And innovation is a team sport. That's why I am so incredibly thrilled to announce our new strategic partnership with Elysian and its brilliant founder. A woman whose vision is as sharp and transformative as her brand. Please welcome to the stage Zara Vance." The applause was thunderous. Zara glided onto the stage, accepting a kiss on the cheek from Julian. They stood side by side, bathed in the spotlight, a power couple in every sense of the word. And finally, Julian said, raising his glass of champagne, I want to propose a toast to the future, to new beginnings, to partnerships that will redefine the landscape of our world, to Nexus Elysian. To Nexus Elysian, the crowd roared back. He never mentioned her. He never mentioned their baby. On his 35th birthday in their home, surrounded by their friends, he toasted to a future that didn't seem to include her at all. He didn't just ignore her. He had publicly, emphatically erased her. The final sharpest cut came moments later. As the music swelled and the party resumed its fever pitch, Amelia saw him by the bar. She had to say something. She had to know. She walked over to him, her heart hammering against her ribs. Julian, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He turned a glass of whiskey in his hand, his eyes bright and unfocused. Amelia, great party, right? The investors are ecstatic. Julian, your toast. She began, the words catching in her throat. He waved a dismissive hand. It's business, honey. You wouldn't understand. I understand that you didn't mention me. Or your son. His face hardened. The charming mask dropped, revealing the cold, ruthless stranger beneath. Not now, Amelia. He hissed, his voice low and dangerous. For God's sake, don't make a scene. This is the most important night of my career. Go find a seat. Go talk to someone's wife. Just don't do this. He turned his back on her, leaving her standing there as if she had been slapped. The music pulsed. The laughter swirled around her. But all Amelia could hear was the shattering of her own heart. And in that moment, she knew. It was over. The fairy tale was dead. Chloe was right. She wasn't just scenery. She was a liability. A problem to be managed. And she would not be managed. Not anymore. Without another word, she turned and walked not to a quiet corner but towards the door. Leaving the party was like breaking the surface of the water after being held under for too long. The cool air of the hallway was a gasp of reality, a shock to her system after the suffocating, perfumed atmosphere of the penthouse. No one noticed her go. The private elevator descended in silence, its mirrored walls reflecting a woman she barely recognized, a pale, haunted face above a sapphire dress. Her hands protectively cradling a life that felt like the only real thing left in her world. The doorman, a kind-faced man named George, who always had a smile for her, looked surprised to see her leaving alone. Mrs. Croft, is everything all right? Should I get the car for you? The thought of being driven by Julian's driver in Julian's car back to their cold, empty bed was unbearable. No, thank you, George, she said, managing a weak smile. I just need some air. I'll get a cab. She stepped out onto Fifth Avenue. The city, which had looked so alien and indifferent from the penthouse window, now felt like a refuge. The stream of yellow came, the distant wail of a siren, the anonymous faces of people walking by it, was all blessedly beautifully real. It wasn't curated. It wasn't a performance. She hailed a taxi, the simple, ordinary act, feeling like a declaration of independence. She got in, the worn leather of the seat, a comfort. Where to, ma'am? The driver asked, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. For a moment, she was blank. Where could she go? Not to Chloe's. Her friend would immediately go on the warpath, and Amelia didn't have the strength for a fight, not even one on her behalf. Not to her parents in Boston. The late-night call and sudden arrival would cause a panic she couldn't bear to inflict. She needed anonymity. She needed a place to disappear. The Greenwich Hotel. She said the name coming to her from a forgotten travel article. It was downtown, far from their Upper East Side bubble, known for its privacy and understated luxury. A place where people went to be left alone. During the ride, she didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a cold, heavy stone in her chest. She watched the city lights blur past the window, each one a reminder of the life she was leaving behind. The glittering storefronts, the grand theaters, the endless stream of people chasing their own dreams. Julian was one of them. He was chasing his so hard and so fast that he had left her and their son behind in his wake. She thought of his words. "Not now, Amelia. Don't make a scene." He hadn't been worried about her feelings. He had been worried about his image, about the investors, about the deal. She wasn't his wife, his partner, the mother of his child. She was an unpredictable variable in a complex equation, a potential disruption to a flawless business plan. The realization didn't hurt as much as it clarified. It was like a splash of ice water, shocking, but sobering. The man she married, the man who loved her for her mind and her soul, was gone. He hadn't just changed. He had been entirely replaced by the CEO, the brand, the icon. At the hotel, she paid with a personal credit card. Julian didn't know she had one she'd kept from her old life. She checked in under her maiden name, Hayes. The quiet professionalism of the staff was a balm. No one recognized her. No one fawned over her. She was just a woman alone, checking into a hotel late at night. The anonymity was a relief so profound, it almost made her dizzy. Her room was beautiful, decorated with warm woods, aged leather, and soft, welcoming textiles. It was the antithesis of her penthouse. It felt like a home, not a showroom. There was a fireplace, a comfortable armchair, and a bookshelf filled with actual books, not just props. The first thing she did was take off the sapphire Valentino gown. It felt like shedding a skin. She let it fall into a silk puddle on the floor. She removed the diamond earrings and the necklace Julian had given her for their anniversary, the ones his assistant had picked out. She stood in her simple slip, feeling lighter, freer. Then she took out her phone. It was buzzing with notifications. Missed calls from Ben Carter. A dozen texts from the party planner. She scrolled through them, her thumb hovering over the screen. Then, with a decisive click, she powered it down. The silence that followed was absolute. She was disconnected. She was unreachable. She was for the first time in a long time free. She ran a bath, pouring in the scented oils the hotel provided. As she sank into the hot water, the tension in her body began to dissolve. The cold stone of pain in her chest began to thaw, and finally the tears came. They weren't loud, desperate sobs, but quiet, steady tears that streamed down her face and into the water. She cried for the man she had lost, for the love she thought would last a lifetime. She cried for the naive girl who had believed in the fairy tale. And she cried for the baby inside her, this innocent life who would be born into a broken home. She lay in the tub for over an hour until the water grew cool. As she dried herself with a thick, soft towel, she looked at her reflection in the steamy mirror. Her eyes were red and swollen, but her gaze was clear. The humiliation was gone, burned away by the quiet anger that had taken its place. She wouldn't go back. She couldn't. She couldn't raise a child in that environment, a place where love was conditional, where worth was measured in stock prices and public opinion. She didn't want her son to grow up thinking his father's attention was something to be earned, a prize to be won. She didn't want him to see his mother shrink and fade until she was nothing more than a ghost in her own home. Her decision settled in her soul with a quiet, unshakable certainty. This wasn't just an escape. It was a rescue mission. She was rescuing herself, and she was rescuing her son. She slipped into the hotel's plush bathrobe, curled up in the large armchair by the window, and pulled a soft cashmere blanket over her legs. She didn't turn on the television or try to distract herself. She just sat there, watching the sky over the Hudson River slowly begin to lighten the black, turning to a deep, bruised purple. She felt the baby move inside her, a gentle, rhythmic rolling. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered, her hands cradling her belly. "And that's going to be enough. I promise." As the sun began to rise over the city, casting a golden glow on the buildings across the river, Amelia Hayes felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She had lost her husband, her home, her life of unimaginable luxury. But in this quiet hotel room, as a new day dawned, she had found something she hadn't even realized. She had lost herself. And she had no idea that hundreds of miles away, the world was just beginning to learn her name. Julian Croft woke to the feeling of a jackhammer inside his skull and the sour taste of expensive whiskey in his mouth. Sunlight, sharp and unforgiving, sliced through a gap in the blackout curtains, striking him directly in the eyes. He groaned, rolling over, and burying his face in a pillow that smelled faintly of Amelia's lavender-scented shampoo. The space next to him in the enormous bed was empty and cold. He fumbled for his phone on the bedside table, his head pounding in time with his heartbeat. 7:30 a.m. He had a board meeting at 9. He sat up, swinging his legs over the side of the bed, and winced as the room tilted. The party had been a success, a roaring success. The investors from Tokyo had been practically eating out of his hand. Ben had confirmed the deal was signed, and Zara had been spectacular. He frowned. Where was Amelia? Probably in one of the guest rooms, pouting. He felt a flash of irritation. She'd been so needy last night, so emotional. He'd told her how important the night was. Couldn't she have just played her part? He'd deal with it later. He'd buy her a new piece of jewelry or a trip to Paris. That usually worked. He stood up, staggered toward the bathroom, and splashed cold water on his face. As he looked at his reflection, bloodshot eyes, stubble shadowing his jaw, his phone began to buzz on the marble countertop. It wasn't a single call, but an incessant, frantic vibration. It buzzed and buzzed, a swarm of angry bees. Annoyed, he picked it up. The screen was a nightmare. 117 missed calls. 342 new text messages. 99+ notifications from every social media and news app he had. His blood ran cold. This wasn't normal. This was a crisis. His first thought was the market. Had something happened overnight in Asia? Did Project Chimera have a bug? He ignored the calls from his mother, from Ben, from his frantic PR chief, and stabbed at the first text message he saw. It was from Ben. "Call me, now! Do not talk to anyone else." Another from his head of PR, a ruthless woman named Cynthia. "Whatever you do, do not leave the building. Do not post anything. Do not even breathe online. We are in DEFCON 1. What the hell was going on? His thumb, shaking slightly, slid to the Twitter icon. He opened the app, and the world fell out from under him. It was the first thing he saw, The #1 trending topic worldwide. Where is Amelia? His heart stopped. Below it, other hashtags trended with terrifying velocity. Julian Croft Nexus AI Zaravance. The look. His hands trembling, he clicked on the top hashtag. The first image that loaded seared itself onto his brain. It was a photograph clearly taken by a guest with a phone, not a professional. The quality was slightly grainy, which only added to its raw, candid power. The photo captured a perfect, damning moment. In the foreground, he and Zara Vance were laughing heads close together, bathed in the golden light of the party. He was looking at her with an expression of pure adoration, his hand touching her arm. They looked vibrant, happy, the picture of a perfect power couple. And there in the background, slightly out of focus but agonizingly clear, was Amelia. She was standing alone, her hand on her pregnant belly. The sapphire of her dress made her stand out from the crowd. Her face, caught in an unguarded moment, was a portrait of heartbreak. She wasn't just sad. She looked utterly lost, a fragile ghost haunting the edges of her own life. The contrast between the radiant joy in the foreground and the profound loneliness in the background was devastating. It was a story told in a single perfect frame. Beneath the photo, the comments were a tidal wave of fury. This picture is worth 1,000 words, and all of them are scumbag. He's laughing with an Instagram model, while his pregnant wife looks like her world is ending. The definition of trash. I've seen the look on her face before. It's the look of a woman who just realized she's completely alone. That's not just a picture, that's evidence. Where is Amelia? He scrolled frantically. It was everywhere. It had been picked up by Page 6 TMZ, the Daily Mail. But it wasn't just the gossip rags. The New York Times had a story on their website's front page. Nexus AI CEO Julian Croft faces online backlash. After viral photo sparks, concern for pregnant wife. Forbes had an article titled Image Problem: How a Birthday Party Became a Multi-Billion-Dollar PR Nightmare for Nexus AI. The photo had a name. The Look. Someone had dubbed it that, and it had stuck. The story was simple, brutal, and universally understood. The powerful, arrogant billionaire, the glamorous, home-wrecking other woman, the forgotten pregnant wife. His phone buzzed again. It was Cynthia. He answered, his mouth dry. "Julian," she said, her voice stripped of all pleasantries. It was the voice of a general in a losing war. "Tell me she is with you. Tell me she is in the next room, and you are both about to release a statement about how this is all a hilarious misunderstanding." I don't know where she is," Julian stammered, the reality crashing down on him. "She must have gone to a guest room last night." He walked out of the bedroom, his bare feet cold on the marble floor. He checked the first guest room. Empty, the bed perfectly made. He checked the second, then the third. All empty. He ran to her walk-in closet. The sapphire dress was gone. So was a suitcase. "Julian, talk to me." Cynthia's voice barked from the phone. "Where is your wife? She's not here," he said, his own voice sounding distant and strange. "Her suitcase is gone. Her dress is gone. She left last night." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. He could hear Cynthia take a long, slow drag from what was undoubtedly her 4th cigarette of the morning. "Okay," she said finally, her voice grim. "So she's not a hostage. She's a ghost. That's worse. Much, much worse. It means she's in control of the narrative, and right now the narrative is that you are a monster who drove his pregnant wife out into the night." The toast! Julian's mind raced back, trying to piece it together. Her face when he'd told her not to make a scene. The toast to Zara. Oh, God. Yeah. Oh, God is right, Cynthia said. The board meeting is cancelled. The stock is already down 9% in pre-market trading. The Japanese investors have postponed the final wire transfer, citing concerns about brand stability. Zara Vance's publicist released a statement an hour ago, saying her relationship with you is strictly professional and that she is deeply concerned for Amelia's well-being. She's thrown you under the bus, Julian. Julian sank onto the edge of the unmade bed, the phone pressed hard against his ear. The penthouse, his castle, suddenly felt like a prison. The silence that had been so peaceful just an hour ago was now accusatory, filled with the ghost of Amelia's presence. "What do I do?" he whispered. "You find her." Cynthia said, her voice like flint. "You find your pregnant, heartbroken wife. You get down on your knees and you beg her for forgiveness in the most public way possible. Because right now, Julian, she isn't just your wife. She's the only thing that can save you." He hung up the phone. The jackhammer in his head was gone, replaced by a terrifying, silent dread. He looked around the vast, sunlit room at the expensive art, the stunning views, the symbols of his success. And he realized that in his relentless pursuit of everything, he had lost the one thing that had ever truly mattered. And the entire world was watching him pay the price. Amelia slept for a few hours, a deep, exhausted sleep, in the unfamiliar comfort of the Greenwich Hotel. She woke not to an alarm, but to a profound sense of quiet. For a fleeting moment, she felt disoriented, the peacefulness a stark contrast to the ambient anxiety that had become her baseline. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back, not with a jolt of pain, but with the quiet, settled weight of a decision made. She was here. She had left. It was real. She ordered breakfast from room service, simple toast eggs and orange juice, and ate slowly, deliberately. It was the first meal in months she hadn't eaten while watching Julian text under the table or listened to him dictate notes to his AI assistant. It was just her baby kicking gently, and the sounds of the city waking up outside her window. The peace was a fragile bubble. She knew she couldn't stay disconnected forever. Her parents would be worried. Chloe would be losing her mind. She needed to let them know she was safe. With a deep breath, as if preparing for a plunge into icy water, she picked up her phone from the bedside table and powered it on. The digital onslaught was instantaneous and overwhelming. The screen lit up with a furious barrage of notifications, the device vibrating so hard in her hand it felt alive. Hundreds of texts, missed calls, news alerts. Her first feeling was a surge of panic, a deer in the headlights, terror. What had she done? Her private pain was somehow public. Her thumb shook as she opened a text from Chloe, sent only 20 minutes ago. Amelia. Please tell me you're seeing this. The world is on fire. Are you safe? Call me the second you get this. I'm already on my way to you. I have a good idea of where a sane person would go to escape that lunatic. Before she could even process it, another text from Chloe came through. Okay, I just saw page 6. Greenwich Hotel, smart girl, don't move, don't talk to anyone. I'm 10 minutes away. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. She navigated to a news site, her eyes widening in disbelief. There it was, the photo. The look. She saw herself as the world now saw her, a tragic figure, a lonely wife, a victim. The sight of her own heartbreak, so raw and exposed for public consumption, made her feel nauseous. This wasn't what she wanted. She hadn't left to start a war. She had left to find peace. But then, as she scrolled, something else began to happen. She read the comments, the tweets, the articles. Yes, there was pity, but there was also a white-hot current of outrage on her behalf. Thousands upon thousands of people, mostly women, were sharing their own stories of being ignored, diminished, and made to feel small. They weren't just defending her. They were identifying with her. Her private humiliation had become a public rallying cry. Every woman knows the look. Standing with Amelia Hayes today, may we all have the courage to walk out of the party. He didn't just ignore his wife. He erased her. We refuse to be erased. A strange feeling bloomed in her chest, pushing aside the fear. It was a flicker of empowerment. She wasn't just a victim in a photo. She was a symbol. The quiet strength that had carried her out of the penthouse last night was being mirrored back at her, magnified 1,000,000 times over. A sharp knock on the door made her jump. "It's me!" Chloe's voice called out. Amelia rushed to open it. Chloe swept into the room like a hurricane, her trench coat flying behind her, a large coffee in one hand and a determined look on her face. She dropped her bag, took one look at Amelia, and enveloped her in a fierce hug. "You did it," Chloe whispered into her hair. "You actually did it. I'm so damn proud of you." When she pulled back, her journalist's eyes were scanning Amelia's face, assessing. "Are you okay? Really okay?" "I am now," Amelia said, and was surprised to find she meant it. "But Chloe, all of this," she gestured vaguely towards her phone. "It's insane." "It's a reckoning," Chloe said, her voice grim but satisfied. Julian built his empire on a carefully constructed image of being the brilliant, benevolent visionary. That one photo shattered the entire facade. It revealed the man behind the brand, and people hate him for it. She took a sip of her coffee. "So what's the plan, because you can't hide in this hotel forever? He's going to find you." "I know," Amelia said, her resolve hardening. "I'm not going back, Chloe. Not ever." "Good," Chloe said, nodding. "That's phase 1. Phase 2 is protecting yourself and your son. You're not just Amelia Hayes, art historian, anymore. You're Amelia Hayes, the woman who took on a billionaire. He's going to fight dirty. He's going to try and control the narrative, paint you as unstable, emotional, vindictive. We need to get ahead of it." Chloe was already scrolling through her phone. "I know people. The best people. You need a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, you need a shark. Someone who's not afraid of Julian's army of corporate thugs." Her fingers tapped furiously. "Catherine Cat Rinaldi. She's the best divorce attorney in New York. She eats men like Julian for breakfast. I'm calling her office now." As Chloe paced the room, speaking in low, urgent tones to the law firm, Amelia walked to the window. The world outside didn't look so scary anymore. She had a friend. She had a plan. And she had the unexpected, overwhelming support of a global audience. Julian had underestimated her. He had seen her as an accessory, a part of the scenery. He never imagined she could become the main event. The war room inside the Fifth Avenue penthouse was operating at a fever pitch. The air was thick with the smell of stress and stale coffee. Cynthia, the PR chief, stood before a massive screen, displaying a terrifying graph of Nexus AI's plummeting stock price. 2 lawyers from the company's top firm sat at the glass dining table, surrounded by laptops and legal pads. Julian, dressed in sweatpants and a t-shirt, paced the length of the room like a caged animal. He hadn't slept. His mind was a chaotic whirlwind of fury, fear, and a bewildering sense of disbelief. How had this happened? How had one stupid picture undone years of meticulous brand building? "The narrative is cementing," Cynthia said, pointing a remote at the screen. A collage of headlines appeared. He chose his side piece over his pregnant wife. Silicon Valley's rotten core. Is Julian Croft the most hated man in America? Zara Vance is not my side piece, Julian roared, slamming his hand on the table. It was a business partnership. The public doesn't care about the truth, Julian. They care about the story. Cynthia shot back, her usual icy composure cracking. And the story is that you're a heartless monster. Zara's team has already fed a story to Vanity Fair about how she was uncomfortable with your overly familiar behavior, but felt professionally trapped. She's painting herself as another one of your victims. The ungrateful, Julian began, but was cut off by one of the lawyers, a severe man named Marcus Thorne. Our focus cannot be on Zara Vance, Marcus said calmly. Our focus must be on your wife. We need a joint statement, a photo of the two of you smiling, a story about a simple misunderstanding the pressures of a high-stakes life. We need to show a united front. How can I show a united front when I don't know where she is? Julian yelled, his voice raw with desperation. He turned to his head of security, a former Mossad agent named Ari. Anything. We're tracking the cab she took, Ari said, his eyes fixed on a tablet. We have a partial plate. We're running it through our contacts at the TLC. We're also flagging all activity on her known credit cards. Nothing yet. The private elevator dinged. The doors slid open to reveal Ben Carter. His face was etched with exhaustion and profound disappointment. He walked past the lawyers and the PR team and stood directly in front of Julian. I tried calling you all night, Ben said, his voice low and heavy. I was busy, Julian snapped. I was putting out the fire you were supposed to be helping me with. Ben let out a short, bitter laugh. The fire, Julian, you lit the match. I stood on that stage and talked about your vision. And then you got up there, and in 5 minutes you burned everything to the ground. Not the company. Us. Your family. Don't you dare lecture me about my family, Julian seethed. Why not no one else has? Ben said, his voice rising. I was there when you met her, Julian. You were a different person. You cared about her opinion. You listened to her. When was the last time you asked her about the museum exhibit she was working on? Do you even know what it's about? Do you know that she's terrified of giving birth? That she's been having nightmares? Or were you too busy changing the world to notice that hers was falling apart? Every word was a punch to the gut. Julian stared at Ben, a cold, sickening realization dawning in the pit of his stomach. He didn't know. He didn't know about any of it. He had been so focused on the future he was building that he had completely neglected the life he was living. Ari's voice cut through the tense silence. We found her. Every head in the room snapped towards him. She paid for a room at the Greenwich Hotel just after midnight. Used a credit card under her maiden name, Hayes, a card that's not linked to any of your joint accounts. Relief warred with fury in Julian's chest. She was safe, and she had planned this. The secret credit card was proof. This was a deliberate betrayal. Get the car, Julian said, his voice deadly quiet. I'm going down there. Julian, no, Cynthia shouted. That's the worst possible thing you could do. We need a strategy, a plan. I have a plan, Julian said, grabbing a jacket. I'm going to talk to my wife. I'm going to fix this. He was the great Julian Croft. He could solve any problem, fix any code, close any deal. He could fix this. He could fix her. He stormed out, ignoring the frantic protests of his team. The scene outside the Greenwich Hotel was chaos. Someone had leaked his destination. A mob of paparazzi and reporters swarmed the entrance, a pulsing, shouting mass of bodies and cameras. As Julian's Maybach pulled up, they surged forward, flashes exploding like gunfire. "Julian, is it true you kicked your pregnant wife out? Are you in love with Zara Vance? Where is Amelia?" Shielded by his security, Julian pushed through the throng, his face a grim mask. The noise was deafening, the questions like tiny daggers. He finally made it inside the hotel lobby, a sudden jarring oasis of calm. He strode to the elevator, his jaw clenched, and rode up to her floor. He found her room at the end of the hall. He stood outside the door for a moment, his anger beginning to fade, replaced by a raw, desperate fear. What if she wouldn't talk to him? What if Ben was right? He raised his hand and knocked the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet hallway. "Amelia, it's me. It's Julian. Please, we need to talk. Just open the door." He waited, his heart pounding. He could hear faint movement inside. After what felt like an eternity, the lock clicked. The door began to open. A wave of relief washed over him. She was going to see him. He could explain. He could apologize. He could fix it. But the person who stood in the doorway was not Amelia. It was a woman in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes, an immaculate grey pantsuit, and a folder held in her hand like a weapon. Her expression was one of absolute, unshakable professional neutrality. She looked at Julian Croft not as a titan of industry, but as an obstacle. "Mr. Croft," the woman said, her voice cool and precise. "My name is Catherine Rinaldi. I am Amelia Hayes's legal counsel." She took a small step forward, blocking his view into the room. "My client will not be speaking with you today, or any day, without me present." She continued, her voice unwavering. "She has instructed me to inform you that she will be filing for divorce. All future communication regarding your wife and your unborn son will be directed to my office. We will be in touch." And with that, she gently but firmly closed the door in his face, the soft click echoing down the hallway, like the sound of a guillotine. Julian stood there, staring at the polished wood of the door, the words echoing in his ears. Divorce. Unborn son. My office. The world he thought he controlled, the situation he thought he could fix, had been taken from him completely. He had come here to demand, to explain, to win. But the game had changed. The rules were no longer his. And he had already lost. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that true wealth isn't measured in stock prices or social status, but in dignity, respect, and the courage to choose yourself, even when it means walking away from everything. She was ignored, but she refused to be invisible. Her quiet act of defiance became a global roar, a testament to the fact that you can't silence a woman who has found her voice. What did you think of Julian's downfall? Was it karma or a crisis of his own making? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life dramas that will have you talking. Click the bell icon so you never miss an update on stories that matter.